Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight to kick off 2026 with two wonderful poets. I'm Helen Pruitt Wallace, and I'm the curator of this program. And I see many friends I recognize, and many folks I hope to be future friends with. So we're glad you're here today. We also have Natalie Tabasco, who is a former reader here. Welcome, Natalie. She happens to be married to Anthony Baruso, who's one of our poets. Yeah, powerhouse of poets. So we have a really special program tonight. We have Caridad Moro-Grenier and Anthony Baruso, who will be reading for us. I want to first do a shout out to the city of St. Petersburg. Thank you so much for supporting our program. But a lot of it has to do with you all coming out. So I see many folks that I recognize every month. We're always the second Thursday of the month. And we really appreciate you being here. And we especially appreciate the support that the museum gives to this program. So a big thanks to Dr. Hank Hine, who is hiding in the back of the room there. Thank you, Hank. Many of you know, if you have been coming, that Hank is also a wonderful poet, and he's read here as well. And I think pretty soon, Hank, it's going to be time to get you back up on the stage. So we'll have to look for an opportunity for that. But yeah, I think it's a tough time. It's a tough year. We're kicking off a tough year, and I usually do start the program by reading a poem per Hank's request, and I'm going to do that again, and I'm determined to try to read something a little more hopeful than what I have sometimes done in the past. But then, right when I start to do that, then something terrible happens again in the world, But anyway, I am still going to do that tonight. And then I'm going to introduce first Anthony, who'll be our first reader, and then Caridad, who'll read after him. So this is a poem, with the start of a new year, we all have our resolutions. Probably we're not alone. My husband Peter's here, and he's my best editor and always supportive here. But we probably, lots of us have the resolution to try to get rid of some of our stuff. You know, we all go through our things and try to get rid of a lot of things at the very beginning of the year. So this poem is about that. It's a concrete poem. It's shaped in the form of a box. And it's an attempt at being a little lighter. It's called Trappings. We're packing up the attic where boxes bulge 10 years in mold and dust. They don't contain the gem they advertise. We wish they did. Instead, they're full of books we never read, old hats, macrame belts, ceramic bowls we made in 7th grade, misshaped, fragile, with pox. They remind us of what we used to be, which may not be all bad, since even we are not our former selves. Each 7 years, all skin cells are replaced, sloughed off with strands of dry hair, toenails we trim and softly drop, or thoughts shoved through cortex, then lost in our graying bubble wrap. Our teeth, too, yellow, fall out, and sex, that hot commodity we give with little more than bump and grind. So what's with all the obsolete loot we can't convince ourselves to leave behind? Like this, the box of wind-up toys that terrorized our cool, neurotic cat. Look, the monkey drumming with a stick, the alligator with a snapping jaw, that quirky dog that squats before each flip. Just take the lava lamps and clarinet, bottle rockets, peace signs, and rugs. For now, despite what each of us was taught, it's better just to take than give away. Our bodies may have mastered letting go, but even then, we'll box some final day, just in case. Besides, you never know. Thank you. Thank you. And I see many writers here. I want to do a special shout out to Peter Meinke, who's our state poet laureate in the front here. And his daughter, Gretchen. Raise your hand. If you're a writer, I know there are many of you here. Okay, thank you for being here. I see Angie Jones, who's just retiring from Eckerd College. I don't know how it's going to happen without her. I know Brooks Peters is here. Brooks, thank you, and Hervey Evans, and anyway, and others I can't see in the back of the room, but thank you all for being here. And a special thanks, too, for Samaya Ayad, who slipped in. She's in the back here. Couldn't do the poetry series without her, or Kim McQuarrie, or our good tech czars in the back. Thank you. All right, on to the program. Anthony Baruso is a visiting assistant professor at English at the University of South Florida and a co-editor of Dive Dapper. He holds a PhD in creative writing from Florida State University, where he served as poetry editor for Southeast Review. His poems have been published or are forthcoming in the Academy of American Poets, Denver Quarterly, Beloit Poetry Journal, Pleiades, the Cincinnati Review, and elsewhere. Winner of the 2024 Louise Bogan Poetry Award, his debut collection, Splice, which you can buy right out front, was published in July 2025 by Trio House Press. Anthony, congratulations on that, and welcome.
Okay, yeah, maybe I'll angle it up a little. Yeah. Can everyone hear me well? Thank you. I have a bad problem where I'll lean into the mic and get really loud, so warn me if I do that. But thank you so much. Helen, thank you everyone here for coming out to hear poems today and for supporting the arts. I think especially now, as we've mentioned, these are very turbulent times, and it's good to have folks come out and hear each other and share the experience that is hearing a poem or a song or anything. So I'm a recent transplant to Tampa. I moved here about 2 years ago. And already I think I've been to the Dalí 11 times, like in 2 years. And so, if you have ever a need for a new tour guide or anything, you may want to hire me. I know all of the exhibits now. I've been here a lot. And this is a place I've really come to love. So it really is a thrill to read here and to share some of my work with you guys. My debut collection, as Helen just mentioned, is called Splice, and it recently came out with Trio House Press. As you can see on the cover here, the skull is a very prominent symbol in my collection, and also it opens up fittingly with a poem that's dedicated to Salvador Dalí. And so I'm going to start with that one. It takes inspiration from a painting Dalí did called Atmospheric Skull Sodomizing a Grand Piano. It's a great name, right? Like how could you not write about that? If you haven't seen this painting before, like a lot of Dalí's work, it's very dreamy, a little bit deranged. Dalí, as we all know, is a very kind of freaky guy, a little bit. And that's something that attracted me to the art, that it's really transgressive, it breaks rules, and he can take something like a skull and he can make it seem amorphous or malleable, like something you can change. A lot of my book is about having a neurological condition called Chiari malformation. And because of this, I have a kind of misshaped skull, and the back of my brain was being squeezed a little bit by the opening at the bottom of my skull. And so that's why in my collection, I keep returning to the skull. I have references to Yorick's skull in Hamlet. I have references to the brain surgery I had a couple of years ago. And so I really thought Dalí would be a great way to, a gateway to kind of reinvestigate my anatomy and look at my skull in some new ways. So this is Atmospheric Skull Sodomizing a Grand Piano, after Salvador Dalí. It is a gross thing to see sound submit itself to skull. With ivory insistence, the slack jaw lifts the cherry lid. Music abounds, but is no less deformed than forms found in a downsloping desert. Eye socket slouched in ecstasy, canoe skulking to golden nowhere, still life with unseen malady. Do you hear Lorca, miles deep in mirage, pleading, "Take me, poetic jolt, eccentric sky, manhandle me with the self-same beak that broke Leda"? For love is honed in onanism and hopelessness. The pianist cracks his fingers with anticipation, then pounds a ruinous instrument. This is the world we live in. You can look away or stroke an eye like a shadow fondling its lack. But behind that sun-baked abode you sculpted, objects turn pliant, unreasonable. Swollen with honest deception, they roll in the throes of an ossified song. All right, so since I started with Dalí, I feel like the second poem has to kind of up the ante and have an even more important cultural icon. So the second poem is about none other than Labubu. Do you know Labubu? So for those that are unfamiliar or don't have children or grandchildren, a Labubu is this little doll. It's very demonic looking, a little bit scary. It has these sharp teeth, but it's also kind of cute. And you'll notice when you go to a poetry reading or when you listen to a poet speak, they often talk about celebrating the everyday, the mundane, the small things that you experience throughout your lives, like really focusing in on them. And I agree with that. I think that's where a lot of poetry comes from. But then again, you never see a poet writing a poem about the Rizzler or about Beanie Babies or about like all these other things, these people who get their 15 minutes of fame. So this is a poem I wrote to praise all the fads out there, those things that have their moment of glory in the sun and then disappear. Ode to Labubu. I never wrote a poem about Honey Boo Boo, and now I regret it. Timeliness is not my forte. I spent a full decade wanting a razor scooter and kicking rocks. Then I wrote poems about comets and caverns and realizations refracting in a river's current. There was no Furby turned oracle in my closet, or Thor swinging his hammer right into my eyes as I sucked the milk dud sweet. It's always been, for me, bland eternity, a stone that comprehends no when, grows smooth out of sheer boredom, but not perfectly, not with battery-operated sentience, not like a Tamagotchi. And a Tamagotchi, for those of you who don't know, is there was this little pet thing. It's an electronic pet that you would put on your keychain and you would feed it. It would grow. It was very, very popular for a span of like 6 months.
Great, I love it.
You had one? Oh, no. So I'm always looking for words. I'm a big word collector. I think every poet really is. I love the sounds of words, their textures, their etymological meanings. And so I'm constantly, with my phone and writing a long list of words that stand out to me throughout the day. I looked at my phone earlier and some of the words were deciduous, cacophony, Hassenpfeffer. Does anyone know what that is? It's a rabbit stew. Yeah. But I think when you start writing a poem with just specific words, it can usually lead you in an interesting direction. Maybe you follow the sound of the word, maybe you follow some metaphor that the word creates. And so that's where this poem came from. It was when I was learning a little bit more about that condition chiari that I have. I learned that the hole at the base of your skull is called the foramen magnum. And it was just such a beautiful word. I was like, foramen magnum, that sounds really grand. It sounds magnificent, right? And then when I looked up the etymological origin, it turned out to mean great passage. And I was like, wow, we all have a great passage inside of us, like beneath our brain. And so this was just so metaphorically rich and suggestive that I felt like I had to write a poem about it, where I entered the great passage and saw how it transformed me or changed me in some way. So this is foramen magnum. In rarefied tongue, with mythic grandeur, we take this term meaning great passage, dumping Dante's Italian and a Tuscan trattoria, and reaching for those Latinate heights towards which our bones have been growing. Trendsetters and coelacanths, primates and argonauts, give that gaping maw behind your mind a taste of lemon sorbet, a palate cleanse, a spoonful of salvation to be carried across the Bering Strait and the Corpus Callosum. But what happens when breaks this plank, when thoughts get stopped up like an autumn gutter? Look at this exquisite still life, my skull a dish, my brain a fish fresh out of flopping, dead-eyed, yet a subtle pulsing from the optic nerve. Did I mention my condition? The brain, braving all elements, breaches its stony fortress, going God knows where. What a headache to see this dumb snail trailing CSF down my back and across every page of this manuscript. Call the Army Corps of Engineers. Hide the Dead Sea Scrolls in your fanny pack. We've got a real situation here. This neural swamp, a cottage industry of self-pity and heroic parataxis. Uh-oh, there it goes again, the brain wearing a kufiya now to keep the harsh sun out of its folds. It thinks it's getting somewhere, and since thinking is all it does, it must be. Hence, I am beholden to the god of probability. What I mean is, odds are everybody's got a fucking problem that some poor brain is expected to fix. So I run a finger across the white sheen of my thoughts and think, nice, no moss. One of the frustrating things about having this a condition that you can't really see is that you a lot of the times you're not really certain about whether you're actually experiencing something or imagining you're experiencing something. And also when you read about Chiari online, there's this long list of symptoms. And so I'm a very anxious person, so I've imagined I've had all of the symptoms probably at some point. And so this is a poem I wrote kind of thinking about how sometimes the body and the mind's experience gets blurred. You don't know, like sometimes you're depressed and your body starts to hurt, or sometimes maybe you broke a limb and you enter a cycle of depression, right? There's always going to be that intermingling between body and mind. It's also a poem that I wanted to write about anxiety and show that anxiety, even though it's this thing that we usually don't like or it pains us in some way, there's also some good things about anxiety, right? It's this way that we protect ourselves. We're able to avoid potential harms and potential dangers. And I think anxiety is the product of having an imagination, right? Like if you are worried about things, it's probably because you're visualizing things. Maybe you're creative, maybe you're an artist. And so I wanted to think about both the positive and negative elements of anxiety. So this is called, and it sounds a little bit maybe like a joke, a hypochondriac walks into 14 lines. Pound cake, earthquake, paranoid zest. I feel the flaw within my chest. The moon is crumbling at its crest. Jesus Christ, I'm a masochist. Coughing riverbrack and wood chips, the headache and thought itch of terminating consciousness. What's the over-under on my being 6 feet lower? Why's the salamander got his tail wrapped around my tumors? Terminus to terminus, Tallahassee to Kalamazoo. My body's that Banksy that shreds itself. It hums a Morricone soundtrack facing off against the mine. Aneurysm, melanoma, heart attack. On a toothpick, I sample each savory demise. So another main thread in Splice is it's a book that's a bit about film as well. I'm a big cinephile, a film fan, and so I'm constantly thinking about my favorite movies, favorite directors, and I often feel like my real life experiences are kind of superimposed by film. Like maybe I'll imagine I'm some sort of character, or I'll just I'm one of those people who will quote movies every 10 minutes. I probably get annoying when you're hanging out with me. But in my book, I have a couple of series of poems. One of them is about character actors. So I talk about folks like Steve Buscemi, Bill Murray, Tilda Swinton, Frances McDormand. I also have some director poems where I'll take the films of a director and I'll kind of edit them together poetically, or combine different characters and scenes from them. And so this film poem is about the goat of cinema, or one of the goats of cinema, Martin Scorsese. It's called Scorsese Dream Song. Drifting into taxicab transience, a windshield's neon grimace, the love-stripped streets of an indisposed city. I look for what's graffitied in asphalt's marginalia. Dopplerized wail of an ambulance, prick of a campaign pin. De Niro, in a wife beater, aims his finger at the mirror. No one trusts anyone. Whip pan from mob boss to stoolie to starlet flicking her cigarette into a heart-shaped ashtray. And here's the hero. Mohawked in a studio apartment, scrolling fragments, stocking cabinets with non-perishables in preparation for the race war. A degenerate bestiary flickers in a porno theater as his date squirms in her seat. I'm latched by these cells. Between heaven and hell, between close-up and wide shot of two rival gangs collapsing on each other, with meat cleavers, fire pokers, trying to smuggle in grace like a shiv in a cake, tired of the 9-to-5 hiding. I make myself into a made man and grope at the dark. Thick black frames and untamed eyebrows lead me to a limbo of smart-mouthed excess, blood-stained, pinstriped, where I'm willing to bash a skull in for the sake of subsistence, then pop an Adderall in Tammany Hall and wait for the music to sour into propellers and give me shelter as Mama's Sunday sauce boils over on the stove. All right, and this is going to be my last poem. I guess before I read it, does anyone else here have kind of like a TV show you like to watch at night to drift off into dreamland? I feel like for me, it has to be a show I've seen a million times. So it's usually Seinfeld, The Simpsons, King of the Hill. When I wrote this poem, I was really into The Simpsons at the moment. And what would happen is usually I'd fall asleep 5 minutes into the episode. So I started to hyperfixate on the opening sequence. Bart skateboarding, Marge buying groceries at the store. And then I really focused in on Bart when he's in detention and he's writing on the chalkboard, writing the same phrase over and over again as punishment. It just seemed so funny to me, and almost like a meme a little bit, how you would take the same image and then reuse it in all these different funny ways. And sometimes he'd write something that's really profound, like the truth is not out there. And then other times he would write things like, I will not put olive oil on the jungle gym. So I wanted to write a poem that was, kind of subversive like that. And so for this poem, you're going to have to do a little bit of work. For every phrase in it, I want you to imagine that Bart has written it 1,000 times on the chalkboard. Also, as I was writing this, it occurred to me that Bart must be short for Bartholomew. And that hinted to me that this could be kind of like a Renaissance poem or a kind of St. Augustinian-like confession. So that's how I got the title Bartholomew's Penance. I will not make deep fakes of Miss Krabappel. I will not bring my musical saw to band practice. A chainsaw is not musical. Sir Mix-a-Lot does not have sprung rhythm. I will not hide war crimes in Milhouse's locker. I will not run a speakeasy in the boys' bathroom. I will not serve turpentine to minors. I will not tell Elliot to eat my shorts. I will not panhandle assembly. I will give Heath Ledger back his posthumous Oscar. I will not get very far with this attitude. I will not swear or swear off. I will not criticize the Western penal system. A fire drill does not demand a fire. The jungle gym does not need a coating of olive oil. I will not smoke menthols and mimic Foucault. I will not dwell in possibility. I will not apply for a Guggenheim. I will not floss with caution tape. The chalkboard does not want for words. I'm legally bound to Principal Skinner's NDA. I will not agitate the social body. I will not steal cogs from the great profit machine. I will not live tweet the couch gag. I will not couch all of my statements in ambivalence. The truth is not out there. I will not endorse bloodletting as sanctioned medical practice. My muse does not speak for me. I will not spray paint El Barto on the Intrepid. There is always more room on the chalkboard. 36 seasons of this is reasonable punishment. It might be like 38 seasons now. I wrote this a couple of years ago. I will not leverage a spin-off. I will not make Whitmanian proclamations about the ever-sprawling soul. I will not snarl at Daddy Decay. The shingles virus is already inside me. I will not call Jebediah Springfield toothsome. I will not toss Sisyphus a beach ball. Being alive is crisis enough. I will not claim to be St. Augustine. Television cannot purify the soul. I will not open the blinds to let a little light in. I will not slap wheels on reason's plank and skateboard into the sunset. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, for that terrific reading. Wow, so many great words. You're exactly right, you are a wordsmith. Look forward to talking about your work. We will do a Q&A after both poets have read, so you can get your questions ready. And I want to do a shout out to Tumblr Books. They're out front. You'll be able to buy Anthony's book and pre-order Cardad's book. And buy another one that she has out there. Yes, very important. So yeah, that was a great reading. Thank you. Cardad Moreau-Grenier is a recipient of an Academy American Poets Laureate Fellowship 2025 for her work as Poet Laureate of Miami-Dade County. And her service is from 2024 through 2026. And that's wonderful to get that fellowship. That's not easy to do, so congratulations for that. She's the author of Visionware, published in 2009, Tortillera, am I saying that right? In 2021, Through the Lens, published in 2026, and also As to Your Comment, forthcoming in 2027 from Texas Review Press. Wow, you've been busy. So, she serves as senior editor for SWWIM, Swim, every day, and poetry curator at large for the Betsy Writers Room. And if you don't know what that is, check it out. I know the poet Sylvia Corbello, who's down here in front and has read for us before. I know that you have been there and maybe some others in the room, and I just hear it's a fabulous program. So she curates that as well. Her work appeared, in 2025, she was named a National Book Award judge in poetry. So that's a really big deal. I look forward to hearing about that. And her work appears in The Slowdown, Verse Daily, NPR, and elsewhere. She lives in Miami with her family. Please welcome Carolina.
Thank you so much, Helen, and thank you to the Dalí for having me. Thank you for coming out, and thank you, Anthony, for being such a wonderful poet to read with. And you made me change my order because of the things you said. I also incorporate a lot of popular culture and to my work because it's fascinating to me why it's popular, how something that creates a zeitgeist among such different thinking kind of unites us. So what's the magic there, right? What's the secret sauce? So I'm going to totally queer that, and I'm going to write about Twilight. And I'm sorry I don't like it, but that'll become very apparent. So I also, my wife constantly says that I never write about her because, of course, I live with her. So this is a love poem for Elizabeth. On our 10th wedding anniversary, we remember our disastrous first date. After learning you did not drink coffee or wine, that you preferred pizza to most things, were in no rush to renew the passport you'd let expire, I was most taken aback by the fact that you loved the vegetarian vampire series I hated. The one named for the moment the sun scatters into rays across the atmosphere. I called bullshit on the whole enterprise. The undead no longer coffined or nostalgic for light, free instead to glitter at dawn beneath a canopy of northern pines. A legend broken open. Only the trope of the bloodied teenaged virgin, bruised and knocked up on her wedding night, remained intact. I thought it was blasphemous, an affront to Stokerian lore. But the lapse in mythology didn't bother you, which bothered me too much to be entirely about you, and more about my affinity for love in the dark. My core a haunted tomb, low-lit, a flicker unprepared for the torch of you. The blaze you held in your fist, fearless as Van Helsing, determined to unearth what I believed I'd sealed tight in the crypt of my heart. Thank you. Thank you. So, and the work I'm reading now is from my new forthcoming collection. I'll dig into Tortilla a little later. Part of my Poet Laureate project is called Generation 305, and it was conceived to have poets interview elders and assisted living communities. And I realized that I had questions of my own, so I interviewed my father. And this one's for him. And it was written at the Betsy Hotel this summer, or last summer. Did you ever learn how to dance? At parties, I sat tabled and watched the other fathers waltz their daughters across the floor. Their girls demure as the dapper daddies smiled down at them. I waited for Bobby to extend his hand and lead us out toward the center of the room. But even though he tapped his toes to every tune, he never turned my way. At home, I begged the mirror to explain. I blamed my freckles, my braces, the image of my mother stamped on my face, reminder of the wife who left. So much time I spent hating myself. I never thought to ask. And no, he never did learn how to dance. So back to popular culture, I am a Stevie Nicks devotee. And this is for an anthology that's forthcoming called White Winged Dove, that's coming out of Sibling Rivalry Press, all about Stevie, and I had to be in that. So this is called Drowning, after Sarah. When you called me from the ship to tell me you had slept for 15 hours again after doubling up on your meds, drowning the night before, I couldn't help but listened. Our connection tenuous across a wireless line up the coast of the Atlantic, blue blur on which the pins of our bodies bobbed on a map, a mirage where we appeared far closer than we were. There was static on that Mayday call, but I heard you say, I keep going on cruises, but I still can't find the sea of love. I was one of the few who knew you at 17, how you'd lift and drop the stylus on the beginning of Sarah. The only one who knew you never got past Stevie singing, drowning, that you never made it to the whole note that followed, the space she left to take a breath and ready for the swim any body of water requires. But you never got past drowning until the needle bent to your whim, yearning etched in vinyl, skipping refrain I couldn't fix. Drowning, 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 like me on the phone with you. I couldn't help, but you heard me say, when you build your house, call me, I'll come by. So I am very fortunate to have wonderful poetry friends who give me prompts and make me write poems that I wasn't prepared to write, but I'm always happy when I do. And one of those friends is Dustin Brookshire, who also read here. And we wrote this together after another poem, another friend of ours, Nicole Tallman. So it's Dustin wants to write a poem with Caridad, after Nicole wants to write a poem with Maureen. The lines that feature Dustin were the ones he wrote, and I wrote the ones that mentioned Caridad. Dustin is writing this poem without his secret weapon, Kirkland brand Pinot Grigio from Costco. Dustin is writing this poem hungry, since he's on another diet, but he swears he won't get hangry. Dustin wants to know what Caridad is having for dinner. Caridad means to tell Dustin she is having grilled chicken and spring mix for dinner, but it comes out as spring chicken and grilled mix. Caridad laughs at the gaffe because it sums up her youth, when all she ate was grilled chicken and spring mix. In public, that is. Caridad sighs with resignation when she says, I got fat anyway. When Dustin hears, reads, thinks the word fat, he thinks of sordid lives, how Bonnie Badilla's character, Latrell, removed the husky label from her son's jeans, sewed on a slim label in its place. Dustin's mother used to ask him, do you want to be fat like your father's mother? Then add, don't tell your father I said that. Don't tell your father is what Caridad's mother says when they slip into the orange Julius at the mall for a midday pick-me-up, teeming with all the sugar he doesn't allow either of them to have. Caridad's father monitors her mother's weight and dress size, which is why her mother bursts into tears when the maroon size 8 slim hip polyester bell bottoms she's been eyeing don't fit her size 10 well-hipped body. Don't tell your father, she says later, at home, as Caridad watches her remove a size 8 tag from a Papi-approved pair of pants and replace the size 10 tag on the new pair she brought home with it. It is painstaking work that requires tiny snips, a practice stitch, a lie ever ready on the lips. Caridad never tells. Thank you. So it is a very tumultuous time, and this poem was inspired for one of those terrible things. For my 21-year-old son who calls me on the day Roe v. Wade is overturned. It's not the ding of a text that comes in, but the trill of his ringtone, landslide. Favorite song I refashioned into a lullaby. Every note a link on the chain of nights that were ours alone. The childhood score I sang on repeat that he no longer asks for. I don't hesitate to answer, though we've been locked in battle over boundaries and definitions, a ping-pong match of contronyms. How fast means firmly affixed, not just swift flight. How buckle means fasten, as well as collapse. How bound means motionless, but also to propel forward. His way, my way, the way I'm not ready to part ways. Yet, On this dirge of a day, the taut rope between us slackens, and he calls to ask if I'm okay. I hear in his voice he knows I'm not, my rage fueled by an arsenal of sorrow. Mama, he says, I'm so sorry. Mama, an old word for a younger version of each of us. Still, enough of them and us to survive the inevitable cleave. We will hold together even after we split apart. Thank you. In defense of my mother, who never bought me a Barbie dream house. I was too young to understand just how young my mother was when she worked the night shift at TRW, building spacecrafts with her hands. Too young to know how it felt to hand over the whole of her check to my father, who gave her an allowance, $10 after 40 hours. $10 he'd drop into her palm every payday. I understood Barbie called the shots. That dream house was hers. Ken, an accessory, sans the authority to tell her what to do. I wrote 31 letters to Santa that year, but he wasn't in charge. My father was. I thought I stood a chance because Mommy loved Barbie's mid-century mod A-frame too, how the chalet gleamed up at us from the slick pages of the Sears catalog, the wonder of real jalousie windows and wall-to-wall carpets unfurled on the kitchen table where she calculated just how long she'd have to lay that chalet away, just how much she'd have to beg to convince my father to pay. I watched her turn the page, no dog ear to save her place. I'd like to say I was happy with the Barbie dream plane she placed under the tree instead, but I blamed her. It would take years to understand. She didn't want me to dream of staying put. She wanted me to dream of flying away. This is another one for Elizabeth. She will be so pleased. Elizabeth and I negotiate, and this poem, the title is the first line of the poem. Elizabeth and I negotiate over what we can afford once we get to Charleston, the holy city, where churches outnumber everything but bars. Our favorite one on Queen Street, where I kissed her on New Year's in 2015, insisting she shouldn't worry because we had a right to feel safe, even in the South. I felt entitled to splurge on a horse-drawn carriage where we cuddled in full sight, got us a king-sized bed and $30 shrimp and grits I paid for with cash I earned after withholding tax, like the couples to our left and our right. We dropped a bundle because after years spent hiding, we knew there were worse things to spend than money, like the time we could never get back. But this poem is not about that. Today, we gauge the exact amount of PDA we can afford. We take kissing off the table, tell each other it's a turn on to wait until we get inside. We feel brave when we allow ourselves the risk of holding hands in the holy city, where we are now relearning how to be afraid. So I'm going to read a couple before I finish up from Tortillera, which is, yes, outside. This one came out in 2020, and it was re-released as a signature hardcover collection in 2022. I'm very proud of it. And just a little context, Tortillera is vernacular, Cuban vernacular, not just Cuban, but specific to my experience. For lesbian, it is pejorative, it is a lash across the back. It is the worst thing that you could possibly level at someone. So of course, I named my book that. I decided to reframe it, buy the t-shirt, wear it, and give it away. So this one, sorry about this. Quinceañera. And if you're not familiar, in the Cuban culture, we don't do sweet 16, we do sweet 15, and they are very interesting. Quinceañera. Papi was too cheap and Mami was too weak to celebrate my quinces in the grand fashion of some of my friends who enjoyed parents willing to mortgage the house to peddle their pochunguitas into the right social circles. But I didn't mind. I had been to the Biltmore, where the super rich threw soirees and their money around. I'd seen a particular Cuban-American princess descend on a zirconium-studded quarter moon that brought forth a gasp from the guests, and as the birthday girl smiled, tipped back and cracked her head on Carrera marble. And once at the Big Five Club, where underwater ballerinas could be had for an extra $300, I saw a water nymph slam back 3 shots of tequila right before showtime, only to have her pass out, the party busted up by a rescue, hot paramedics who came to resuscitate her back to the horror of a shrieking 15-year-old, 1,000 layers of sodden lavender pooling at her feet. The kind of chiffon I had never seen at Angelita's Salón de Quinces in Hialeah, my favorite of all the quince spots, where third-generation cousins gathered for generic booze, dressed to the same shabby nines, whooping it up as they waited for the pink scallop shell to fall open, drawbridge slow, and reveal a perky pearl, rouged and posed on velvet, compulsory crinolines and organza fanned out beneath a crunchy taffeta gown, trumpeting the arrival of yet another available Juanita. Corseted assets waiting to be plucked by any one of the Red Palm boys lining the walls. I'm going to end, thank you. I'm going to end on a poem that I wrote as a part of an ekphrastic project I did at the Frost Museum at FIU in conjunction with the Smithsonian Museum and their exhibit, Our Latino Art. So this was based after an installation by a Puerto Rican artist named Adal, after West Side Story, upside down, backwards, sideways, and out of focus. So I wrote about each section. 1, snippets of West Side Story, Los Angeles, California, 1974. This is how you learn you are not an all-American girl. Once a year, you watch West Side Story on the screen of your parents' 1974 Zenith and catch a glimpse of yourself on television. You are the firstborn gringa in the family. Your English is perfect, but you're not like your friends. You don't go to slumber parties or play dates. You don't join the Brownies or take ballet. But once a year, you get to live in Technicolor and root for the Sharks because they speak Spanish too. You're taught there is safety in numbers. You move in packs, sibling cloistered in an apartment building, just like Maria's. Cousins and tias on every floor, duenas en batas de casa, adept at concealing battalions of Playtex cross-your-heart bras, black lace slips that slide off the shoulder, the delicate mauve of a fading bruise. During the mambo scene, your mother dances around your living room, tells you to watch her, shows you how to control the hula hoop of your skirt, so the crinolines she has pinned to your PJs orbit around your hips. Ruffled panties, a flash and blur, makes you promise not to tell your father what you've learned. Like Anita, your mother knows her way around a bolt of cloth. But you say nothing of how she sews the clothes you wear, how after work she comes home to your dresses, red cushioned pushpin corsage at her wrist, alchemy of thread and simplicity patterns, spun into gold standard replicas, fit for the girl you want to be, but aren't. 2, what I told Pedro Pietri about my father at the Nuyorican Cafe. He was never late. He didn't have a car. He worked. He walked to work. He was always on time. He was on time on the day the wheel spinner took his finger. He was on time on the morning the foreman was late. He was on time on the morning the foreman forgot to check his machine. He heard his finger jam the machine before it saw it severed. He saw his finger spinning in the wheel before he felt the pain of its loss. He joked that the wheel spinner ate his finger before he ate his breakfast. He joked that he should have called in sick. He joked because he had no sick days. He apologized for breaking the machine. He apologized for its blood, for how it tie-dyed the wheel. He apologized after he fainted. He apologized for the mess his mangled hand left on the floor. He apologized to Hector, who was sent to clean up the mess. He was 21. The wheel spinner was older than he was. The foreman said it was an accident. The foreman said the company was not at fault. The company offered him $1,500. He thought $1,500 was a fortune. The foreman told him $1,500 was more than the going rate for a single finger. He thought $1,500 was more than he deserved. He did not say the foreman was usually late. He did not say the foreman was usually hungover. He did not say the foreman had to rig the machine every morning. He said it was an accident. He said the foreman was not at fault. He said the company was not at fault. He signed the no-fault agreement. He signed it with his left hand. He signed the check with his left hand. He walked home with 15 $100 bills in his pocket. He bought a solid gold ID bracelet branded with his name to remind him of who he was. He went back to work as soon as they let him. He was never late. Thank you.
Wow, another terrific reading. Thank you so much, Caridad. That was just great. Okay, we're going to segue now into our Q&A. So I'm sure some of you have some questions for these poets, how they make all that magic happen. I'll start us out with one unless does somebody have one now already? Oh, yes, Angie, please. Wait for Samaya. She's got the mic, and that way the people on a live stream will hear us.
First off, I want to say I think you made me almost cry about 6 times. Your poetry is just amazing.
Thank you, but I'm sorry.
No, and Anthony too. Yours are just so creative and funny. Yeah, and you. So can you tell us about being a judge for the National Book Award?
Ooh, I read a lot. It was a really great experience, but it was a very interesting way to find out what is happening in poetry on that particular year. And I was very grateful for the experience, and I read his book before I met him, so I felt like I kind of knew him, right? So and that was part of the beauty too, that when you're looking at it from that specific lens, you really, really take the work in. So, but it was a lot of reading, and my postman was very mad at me. We actually got the physical books, not just PDFs.
How many books did you have?
288.
288. Wow. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
It's just more of life. I'm a teacher, so I'm like,
Thank you, Samaya. Yeah. Wow, that is a lot of books.
yes, it was a lot of books.
How much time did they give you to do that?
We started getting them in March, and we had to be done by August.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but we also got them in PDF, so that helped a lot. So I was reading constantly, no matter where I was. I was like reading.
Yeah. Did you see any recurring subjects that you wouldn't necessarily have expected?
Poets, of course.
Yeah. So what were
Misery, heartbreak, disillusionment, self-doubt,
The usual.
anxiety, little hope every once in a while.
Good question. Other questions? Nope. I'd love for you to both tell us a little bit about craft. I'm interested in, first, where you get your ideas, and what to you makes a good poem? And maybe, yeah, Anthony, if you'll start, that would be great.
Yeah, I think for me it's kind of like the process is different every time, but there's also like a kind of brewing period that happens beforehand that's the same. So like I said before, I collect a lot of words, I write them down in my phone notes. I also have a collection of different lines. So if I hear someone say something crazy throughout the day, I'll jot that down and be like, well, how can I fit this argument about a latte into my poem later today? So I think for me, it's good to have a little bit of language first so that I'm not forcing the poem in a particular direction, or I'm like, I really need to write about this. I think the more open I go into the poem, the more it kind of explores the language and does surprising things. And I guess too, it's not always the case where I know how the poem's going to look on the page. I think, sometimes I'll immediately say, I want this poem to be a sonnet. And so I know it's going to be 14 lines. It'll be a love poem. But then other times I start writing and I'm like, oh, maybe I'll have really short lines here. Or maybe I'll have very long Whitmanian lines here and just kind of rant about some subject. And I think part of the fun of writing poetry is kind of figuring out what form it's going to take and how it's going to take over the page, right? But yeah, would you want to talk?
So then if I may, so that suggests you almost start more with some idea about structure or some idea about a particular word or sound, even before maybe a feeling. Is that what you're kind of saying? Or that leads you to?
Yeah, I think usually I start with language, but occasionally I think it's just like different every time. And if I was like every time I'm gonna do it this particular way, I would feel boxed in. So sometimes it's like I find the form as I'm writing a poem, and then other times I know the form I want to, or the form I'm gonna attempt and see if it works out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, great answer.
A lot of what Anthony said. I'm very much the same. I take notes. I'm a lightning bolt writer, I call it. Sometimes I have to go write something because it comes to me, but I rarely set out to write in form. That just kind of, I am the writer in service of the poem, and the poem will reveal itself, and you cannot force it, and it will let you know if you are forcing it. So I find that, and I wish it wasn't such a woo-woo answer, but it really is like that. It just kind of, it comes through you and the poem knows what it wants.
So that suggests that's more of an idea or a thought or a feeling?
A feeling, a thought.
First
I
for
also
you.
hear it. Some people read it out loud and I do, but when
Yeah,
I'm
I do.
writing it, I hear the music in my head, and I think that's because I'm also a musician. So that's what I'm really working in service of the sound. And when you do the sound and the flow, the form is revealed. I've been trying to write a villanelle for 25 years. They don't work for me. Because then I want to explain the line, and it's like, no. So,
Only Elizabeth Bishop.
right. That's the one I've been trying to write.
I think many of the folks in the audience probably know what a villanelle is, but do you mind just briefly saying what it is?
You want to give the
It's hard
exact?
to explain exactly, but
It's
it's
repetitive.
A collection of tercets,
Yes.
and then you move the first line
To the
third
third line.
the second stanza.
And then it just keeps
Yeah,
braiding.
repetition of
If
the
you
first
think
and
about
third.
One Art by Elizabeth Bishop,
Right.
that's a villanelle. And she messes with the form a little bit because she changes some of the lines. That's that parentheses, write it. That's one of my favorite moments of all of poetry because, write it.
Yeah.
So that's what I say. That's what I'm hearing, write it.
Yes. Yeah.
Whenever I see that line, it always makes me think like someone's grabbing her hand and forcing her to write the line, right?
It is such a great moment
Yeah.
in that poem. Yeah. If some of you don't know what that poem is, check it out. One Art by Elizabeth
One Art
Bishop.
by Elizabeth Bishop.
Yeah, it is great. And the key with the villanelle is to, because it is based on all that repetition of the first and third line, and also a rhyme scheme, if you choose to follow that, that goes all the way through the poem. But the trick is to give yourself a lot of latitude with those repetitions, so you're not just saying exactly the same lines. You want to change them up a bit, which Bishop does do, and that's really a far better way to approach it. So. Yeah. So do either of you work with, I'm going to say pre-writing. So, in grad school or when with my students, we would do clustering exercises or free writes or brainstorming, all the things that sort of get some of that language, get some of those ideas kind of percolating on the page. Do you recommend that to students, or do you use some of that with your own writing, or do you find that at this point you don't really end up doing much of that?
For me, it depends on the poem. I wrote a poem after Maureen Seaton's book, When I Was Straight, which I didn't end up reading. And I looked up every definition and iteration of the word straight. And I kept repeating it each time in a different form. So that, I do that sort of thing, but like...
Research, yeah.
Yeah, recently. The poem comes to me typically, the idea comes, and I don't need to brainstorm. I will do research, but like to, service the idea already. But for the most part, I'm not doing a lot of brainstorming. I tell my students to do it, but I'm a terrible student.
I think one of the main, I guess, well springs that I return to is just kind of writing a lot of ekphrastic poetry, and it sounds like you do as well. Ekphrasis is basically poetry that's based off of visual art or tries to translate it into the written word in some way. And it goes all the way back to like ancient Greek writing. Like I think one of the earliest known ones is about, in the Odyssey, it's about Homer's shield, and it kind of comes to life and it's animated. And I think that's one of the great things about having a museum like this is you go around, you look at Dalí's paintings, and if you want to translate it into a poem, you can begin to animate that painting, right? Like, how are the objects and characters in this painting moving? Maybe there's a character in that painting and you can embody them and kind of move through their landscape. And then with Splice, I was writing a lot about film. And I feel like that's almost the opposite process of writing about art, where with the film, everything is usually moving and changing so quickly that I like to slow things down and really focus on an image or freeze frame things. Rather than animate, really focus in on something, or think about like how a film can be translated into a poem. Can you give a sense of editing on the page? Can you give a sense of like the frame and something being at the top and something being at the bottom? So I find that to be pretty exciting, is like when I can take one form of art and work it into another one.
I love that. Yeah. Questions from any of you all? In the back, yes.
Are either of you interested in place poetry, and has Florida ever featured substantially in your poetry? The reason I'm asking is because I write, and I'm from Florida, and I can't write about Florida.
Can you write about
Great
Florida?
question.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
It's funny, the book that's coming out now in March is an ekphrastic chapbook, but I extended or queered that definition of ekphrastis, and I included place. For example, I wrote a poem about Vizcaya. Vizcaya is a very grand house in Miami. And, for us, like, that's where quinceañeras take their pictures, for brides. That's all I knew of it. So I got an in-depth tour, and they took me across the street to the village where Vizcaya was created. And that was my in. So I wrote about the hands that built it versus the effigy, right? So that's how I do it. I step into it through a certain lens, because it is very difficult to write about Florida. But I would say this to you, you're here, so writing about yourself is writing about Florida.
There you go. Yeah. Do you ever write about, even though, you're here and not in Cuba, but have you written much about Cuba? Even if
No,
it's
I've
through
never
your
been to
parents'
Cuba,
eyes?
and my only experience
Your
of
family?
Cuba is in the diaspora. And it's interesting because I know that what I know of Cuba is a construct of the memory my parents have of it.
Right.
And it's been tainted and tinged with nostalgia and time and grief. So it's like a dreamscape. It's not a real place. And the way I address Cuba is by personifying it through my family.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I feel like I don't write a lot that's directly about geography or about landscape, but usually in my poems it comes through in the way that people talk or the way that I talk. Usually there's a lot of different voices that inhabit my poems, so suddenly you'll hear something that is very Staten Island, which is where I'm from Staten Island. So there's a lot of like, Italian, New Yorker, coffee type things that show up in my poems. I have this one poem I wrote about Pete Davidson from SNL, and it mentions a bacon, egg, and cheese. And I feel like, that's a quintessential New York thing. It's got to be, one unit, one single thing, and it has to be in that order, right? It can't be an egg, bacon, and cheese. It's a bacon, egg, and cheese, right? So I think it's a lot of the language of place I kind of carry inside of me. Trying to think of another example might be the Scorsese poem I read before, Mama's Sunday Sauce boiling over on the stove. Yeah. Just these little things that if you're an Italian American or if you're from Staten Island or New York, will kind of slip into your poems. I've only lived in Florida. Well, I have lived in Florida for a while now because I lived in Tallahassee before Tampa when I was getting my PhD at FSU. And I think too, like, just thinking about the political landscape is something that's come into my poems a lot. And I guess just kind of like, working through the transition of going from one place to another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think through your language, through your word choice, I'm hearing a lot of, the Italian, background of your poems is very prevalent. And
Shouldn't you called it gravy?
Yeah, that's what my grandpa would have called it. Yeah. The ragu.
Yes, Harvey.
I'm struggling to write poems about my mother and my father, and it's really, really hard. And do you have subjects that you want to write about and are compelled to write about, but struggle mightily and fail again and again and again to succeed at?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Do you?
I read a lot about family, but I always caution the disgruntled that it's fictional. They may be a starting point, but they're never like, it's not testimony. And I tell that to myself as well. And I met Sharon Olds at a workshop years ago, and I was struggling the same to write about my family. And she said, a poem never killed anyone. Mm. And I went, you're absolutely correct. So, and it's funny because the poem I read about my father, we talk about serendipity and the muse and all that. I was at the Betsy. I'm a morning writer. I was up. I was at the table, and they had this great music list. And this song, Yesterday When I Was Young, that I haven't heard in like 30 years, is my dad's favorite song. Mm. And I was writing this poem about him. So I called him, and I'm like, this is happening, blah, blah, blah. And like 3 weeks later, he says to me, so what happened about that poem you wrote for me? What did you put in the poem? So I read the poem to him, but it led to this moment where I said to him, so Dad, did you ever learn how to dance? And it created this like moment. So I would say, sometimes we're afraid to broach certain subjects that we find, difficult or we're on the fence about writing, but you'd be surprised how ultimately it might lead to a different outcome than what you thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I say, write the poem. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't show it to anyone, write the poem.
Mm-hmm.
Do you show your poems to family members? Will you share? No.
Depends on the poem.
Yeah. Because when I was doing my undergraduate, I had a teacher named Kate Marvin, and I think her first day's speech was, "Do not ever show your poems to your mom." And that was her first rule of poetry is if you think your parents are going to read it, it's not going to be a good poem, right? So pretend as if your parents do not exist or never existed when you're writing. I think that's a good rule of thumb.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, and this is related, I think. Both of you, are so careful with your craft. Your poems are wonderful, both, and they're very different, I think, in many ways. I'm curious. For both of you, do you find yourselves in your revision taking many lines out? And I ask that question because I get the feeling that your poems are both so well crafted, even though they have a lot in them. They both have a lot of feeling and emotion, a lot of sound and action vocabulary. But how often do you know from the start pretty much what you're going to say and you leave the poem alone? And how much do you find that in the revision process you wind up taking out lines that you'd originally thought would be in the poem?
Yeah, I think for me, the usual process is that I end up cutting back more than I expand on things. And I think that's out of just sheer necessity. Like when you write something and you're like, I need more for this, it's not enough, that is painful, right? Like it's gonna be hard to find more language.
Yeah.
When you overwrite something, like say you have 3 pages of stuff and you wanna cut back to a single page, for me, that feels like an easier process where I can cut things out, I can reshape, and it doesn't feel quite as, I guess, stressful when you overwrite. Then again, I think there are some cases where I'll write a poem, like I think this happened with the hypochondriac one that I read, where I wrote it in one sitting and it felt like, I don't think I edited it at all. It was like one full cohesive thing. That hardly ever happens for me, but it happened with that one poem, so I was very happy with it.
Interesting.
Same. Like I have a couple that's happened with, but hardly ever happens. It's easier to take away than to add.
Yeah.
And sometimes, Allen Ginsberg, "Kill Your Darlings." Sometimes the line that started the poem will not stay in the poem. And if I love the line very much, I put it in a slush pile file that I have, because maybe it's just not for that particular poem, but at some other point, it'll be
Right,
there.
right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it also sometimes depends on how, well, at least for me, how old the poem is. Sometimes I'll have drafts that I've started that then I put aside, sometimes for a pretty long period of time. And then when I go back into them, I will need to add lines. And you're right, that is tough. But sometimes you just need to reopen the poem. The poem's got to be opened up in different ways, especially if there's been the passage of time.
Sometimes they need to breathe, and you need to breathe. And then
Yeah.
you're two different entities when you see each other again.
Yeah,
then
that's
it
right.
kinda-
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Like that Twilight poem, I've been writing that for 10 years.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
And then it happened.
Yeah. Good. Other questions? Anyone? Oh, good. Thank you. Here comes Samaya.
This just popped into my head and has nothing to do with anything. But are either of you afraid of AI?
Terrified. I saw Terminator.
I feel highly skeptical of AI. I do though, like I think there are some ways in which I'm like, well, there are some things you can do with it. One way I've thought about that is, have you ever heard of the term like automatic writing?
Yeah.
So
Dalí did a lot of that.
Yeah. So like, I think Surrealists did that. Dalí did that. Andre Breton, who was one of the
Absolutely.
Surrealist main people. And I think like, there's so much possibility in terms of using computers to kind of riff off of, or to randomly generate things that you respond to. I don't like the idea of ever having a computer think for me. And I noticed that that's happening for a lot of my composition students. I don't know if you noticed that for you. So that part of it is very scary. But I am, I guess, intrigued at least a little bit about like, prompts and reorganizations that may come from computer generated work.
You're younger than me. I have no faith. To your question, I think it's going to lead to abject terribleness.
More likely that direction, I think, yeah.
So I have a little bit of a different take on that. I would never use it for creative work. I do think it's a pretty amazing tool to help with research. And sometimes, for me anyway, some of the poems I'm working on, in order for me to open them up and get them to go different directions, I need to be doing some research. And it can be a terrific tool for that. But it's so funny because sometimes while I'm doing that, AI will then say, would you like me to help you write a few lines using that? I'm like, no, because I don't want to use it for the creative work. So you have to kind of guard against that. But I don't know. At least so far, I feel like you can really draw that line between having research. Now, you can't always count on it. In fact, a friend, just kind of for kicks, asked something, describe the poetry of Helen Pruitt Wallace or something, and it spit out all this stuff, and it supposedly quoted one of my lines, but it was a line I had never written. So, that was a little disconcerting. So, yeah, you can't always count on it. But okay, any other questions? Oh yeah, right here. Thank you.
I enjoyed it so much with you guys. Oh, okay. I feel special now. Do any of you write any other things besides poetry?
I write creative nonfiction.
Like short stories, that type
Yes.
thing? Yeah, okay.
And I also write nonfiction based on poetry.
Oh, okay. And you, sir?
I like writing film reviews. Like I've written a couple of film reviews. Actually right now I just started a project with my wife, Natalie, right there, called Dive Dapper. And so this was previously something do any of y'all know Kaveh Akbar? He's
Yes.
a poet and novelist.
He's
He
wonderful.
Yeah, he's incredible, and one of my favorite writers. And he was doing this interview website called Dive Dapper for about maybe a decade, and then he stopped about 5 years ago. So I don't know what compelled me to do this, but I cold emailed him and said, I see Dive Dapper sitting there. Is there any chance you would want someone to take over that site and do interviews? And he had so many amazing interviews with people like Ocean Vuong, Carl Phillips, Diane Seuss, just like so many of my favorite writers.
Wow.
And so he said, do you guys want to take over the site, to me and Natalie? So we've been doing some interviews for that and just started. I did Natalie Shapiro. Natalie did Heather Crystal. And who was your first one? Gabrielle Bates? Yeah. So that's something I'm really excited about and just find it super fun because it's, I think especially if you haven't gone to an MFA or if you're not currently going to school, it's a great way to learn about poets is just seeing what they have to say about writing. What is their process? I think, there's never any hard rules. But the more you hear from other people, the more possibilities you'll be aware of and the more intentional you can be about the choices you make on the page.
That's divedapper.com.
Divedapper.com, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, that's interesting. And the reason why I asked this question is I'm a published writer myself, and I just started poetry. But how it came to be with me was I started with children's stories. And then from there, I started writing short stories. And then from there, I got to poetry, which I never thought I would get into because I never was interested in that. But here's how I've been advancing myself. I would take my story from my child's tale and make a poem out of it. Or I would take it and make a short story out of the same thing, but I'd make it like an adult grown type of thing. And then I would take my child's story or my short story into a poetry. So I'm taking little bits and pieces to make like a big puzzle.
Yeah.
And it's great.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah,
I'm
just to
so
play around
happy.
like that is terrific.
I love that. Yeah, thank you
No,
so
and
much.
I love that idea too because I think that the critic Walter Benjamin said this. He said something like the art of storytelling is retelling. And when you're adapting and trying things in different forms, that's basically what writers have been doing forever.
Yes.
I tell my students this a lot, that out of Shakespeare's plays, I think he had maybe 30 or 40 something plays, 3 of them are original. There's 3 of them that we can't really figure out, well, what is the origin of this? The rest of them are retold stories. They're histories, they're plays. And so a lot of creativity is not doing something completely new. It's kind of riffing off of what's been done and finding a new angle for it.
Oh yeah, I got lots of angles from my stuff. Like movies, plays, cartoons, merchandise.
That's
I'm
great.
whipping it.
Good for you. Good for you. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I happen to be a student and I'm studying drama, so the Shakespeare just made me come up with a question. Both of you have such distinct voices and styles in your writing, and I was wondering, as someone new to writing, if you had any thoughts or advice about finding kind of your own distinct version of retelling, if that makes sense, or
You're talking
how
about
you
voice.
would your voice becomes nuanced and developed.
Do you have any voice idea? How do you find a voice? Do you know?
A lot of it goes to your question about, are you afraid to write something? You need to trust your voice. And I'm a voracious reader, fiction-wise, so it took a minute, because it's like when the Beatles were sued by the Shirelles or George Harrison for the My Sweet Lord, and he was like, I'm so sorry, it just kind of, settled in my brain and my synapses, right? It's the same for if you're reading a lot. So when I was younger, it was almost like I was in drag. I was writing what I thought it should sound like. But once I started to trust myself, I just wrote me, journaling, drafting, like just hot writing, and trust that you have something to say and that nobody else can say it the way you're going to do it. That's your voice.
That's great. Yeah.
That's great. And that's kind of what I was thinking when you asked that too. There's a poet named Richard Hugo who has he has a collection of essays called Triggering Town. And one thing he says in it is something along the lines of trust in the adhesive force of your personality. And what I think he means by that is, if you kind of just assume if you put one thing there and you put another thing there, that's your voice, right? The things you care about, the things that come from your imagination are automatically going to be your voice. And in some ways it sounds a little bit like a cop-out, like a little bit circular, like, of course it belongs, I wrote it, right? But in another sense, I think when you start saying that it belongs, or if you feel that it belongs, you can start making really unexpected connections. You can trust yourself a little bit more and make like crazy leaps that you wouldn't expect to make. So I think that's a question that I would ask people all the time when I first started writing. And I think I still have that question to a degree. Like, I don't know what my voice is, but at the same time, I think you get more confident as you continue writing.
The voice is not a monolith. I would hope that my voice is not the same in my new book than in my first book, because that would imply that I haven't changed at all.
Right.
So there are some things that are always going to be me, but your voice will adapt and will change.
Yep.
So just have
I'm so
faith.
glad that you said that. I think you're really right. And sometimes I think as writers we think we have only our voice, but especially as we continue to read a lot of different poets. We just had Barbara Hamby and David Kirby here last time, and those of you who were able to come, they're doing all that great work with what they call odes, and they have so much information, and they're so smart, and their poems are just ricocheting everywhere, and I don't know, I think I found it very inspiring to then go back and kind of want to do some more research, open up the poems, find ways to get more stuff in them, and so yeah, to allow ourselves that, I think that's a really important point. I do love that book, The Triggering Town by Richard Hugo. That's one to write down.
Blink. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I would add too that there's so many poets out there who write polyvocal poems, so poems that have more than one voice in them. So if you read someone like John Ashbery, or
oh, that's right. Yeah.
Or someone like even Kenneth Koch, and a lot of the New York school writers, they inhabit a bunch of different voices that are talking to each other or arguing with each other. And I think that's a fun prompt sometimes, is just like, how many voices can I squeeze into a single poem?
And I have to do a shout out for Peter Meinke's book, The Shape of Poetry, which is just a really terrific textbook. I hope you guys are writing some of these down. Yeah, his book, The Shape of Poetry, Peter, that's such a great book. You have so much good stuff in there, and I think you do refer to Richard Hugo maybe in some places in that book as well. But yeah, that's one to also add to your list. And what has always stood out for me from your book is when you're talking about revision, you caution us as poets to not think in terms of only revising for the idea, but rather to trust our images and let the sound carry the poem and go by the music of the poem. So rather than trying to revise it just for, is it right or is it, true or whatever, trust your ear and read the poems aloud. and I would say not only as you're revising, but also even as you're writing the poems. So I think we have to shut it down so that these folks can go sell their books. Please meet them out there and they can sign them for you. And thank you all so much for coming. Don't miss next month. That will be February 12th. We're going to have a wonderful poet, Peter Balakian, and another poet. Peter Balakian is a Pulitzer Prize winning poet. And Ajibola, are you still here, Ajibola? He was here a little bit ago, but he had Peter Balakian as his mentor. So he will be joining us. He's going to be in the Tampa area. So please come back, February 12th. All right, thank you all. Bye.